both Meghan and Harry have an intensity, a degree of what some people would call almost psychotic energy. And I think, it's the recognition that one shark has for another. Oh, so nice to meet you. Shall we go hunting for sea lions together? And I mean, Harry was having trouble finding a lady to marry. Harry was desperate to marry. Harry was desperate to have love, to marry, have children. Harry was desperate to replicate what William had. And this is really important. And people don't seem to understand that Harry was the it was the third wheel in that relationship for years. And Harry couldn't close the deal.
One of the strongest threads running through Lady Colin Campbell's analysis is that Prince Harry wasn't the confident, eligible bachelor the media painted him to be. Sure, he had the royal title, money, and plenty of girls who would date him for a few weeks, but when it came to finding someone serious, he was struggling. Harry desperately wanted what his brother William had, a stable relationship, marriage, kids, and a solid family life.
Lady Colin Campbell, why was Prince Harry so easily seduced by Meghan Markle? Because I think back to that time period, and he was a guy who really had the pick of all the women who he wanted in London. I mean, indeed, I remember revealing that he'd had a fling with the singer Ellie Goulding just a couple of weeks before things turned serious with Meghan Markle. So it wasn't that there were not lovely, very desirable, very famous British women, both in terms of the celebrity world and the aristocratic world, who were available to Prince Harry. So why was it that this D-list American walks in and all of a sudden all bets are off?
But unlike William, who landed Kate Middleton, Harry kept striking out. His exes, Chelsea Davy, Cressida Bonos, and others, eventually walked away, not because they didn't like him, but because the baggage of being tied to Harry and the royal family just wasn't worth it.
Well, I think on some level, Dan, water seeks its own level, and each of them has personality traits that are compatible with the other. I think Meghan is a very forceful personality. Harry is a very blusteringly forceful personality who's very impetuous and very impassioned. And I'm being polite because I could use rather more pejorative words to describe his quite at times outrageously bizarre behavior. But Meghan, I think both Meghan and Harry have an intensity, a degree of what some people would call almost psychotic energy. And I think, it's the recognition that one shark has for another. Oh, so nice to meet you. Shall we go hunting for sea lions together, sort of thing. I think there was that element. But I know that you and many members of the media think that Harry could get any woman he wanted. Well, he might have been able to initially get a girl into bed once or twice. But I happen to know as a fact that because the friends of my children who Harry tried to get set up with recoiled from Harry. And I mean, Harry was having trouble finding a lady to marry. Harry was desperate to marry. Harry was desperate to have love, to marry, have children. Harry was desperate to replicate what William had. And this is really important. And people don't seem to understand that Harry was the third wheel in that relationship for years. And Harry couldn't close the deal. Chelsea Davy, she moved on. Cressida Bonus, she moved on. One or two others whose names I will not mention, but who are people who are friends of my children. Some of them recoiled from, sorry, off, and so, and yeah, then he had, sort of ships passing in the night with various girls. But nothing came of any of that because, first of all, the well-bred girls ultimately didn't want to. Being royal was not so desirable that they would spend the whole of their lives tethered to Harry. That was the reality. So Harry was having real trouble finding a permanent woman. And he says that as soon as he met Meghan, there was a click. And I think there often is a click. I mean, certainly, I don't know about with you, but with me, whenever I've met somebody who was important, there was an immediate click. And psychologists would say that on an atavistic level, you recognize the reality of each other. Oh, as a friend of mine who was a famous psychologist said, in the first 15 seconds of meeting someone, at times you know more about them than you will know in the next 15 years. And so you should trust your instincts. Well, presuming, of course, you have good instincts. And so there was all of that going on. And he couldn't land a decent girl. And so he landed Meghan. And I think he was always going to end up either with somebody who truly loved him and truly was prepared to put up with the rubbish that went along with him. But that meant she really had to love him an awful lot. And there are other people who've had relationships like that and they have worked. I mean, to an extent, for instance, William and Catherine have a relationship like that. I mean, loving any Prince of Wales is not a bagatelle because it comes with so much baggage. And William is in some ways a very loving and great guy and very decent person. But in other ways, he's an extremely complex individual.
One of the more brutal parts of Lady CS take is how she strips down the myth of Meghan as a Hollywood star. She reminds us that Meghan was making at most $50,000 per episode on Suits, with small-time movies on the side. Not bad, but not superstar territory. From Harry's sheltered perspective.
And he's had a very, very trying life, and it's left its mark in ways that have turned out to be positive. But, I mean, you have to be a pretty intelligent, sort of very stable, very equanimous personality to actually be with William. And so William got his true love. Harry never got his true love. And what did Harry end up getting? Meghan Markle. So he was always going to either end up with true love or with no one or with then an opportunist. And he's ended up with an opportunist.
Lady C, can I just ask you about those two relationships that you talk about? Because if we start with, well, let's start with the most recent serious relationship before Meghan, which was Cressida Bonus. In Spare, Harry makes out as if he had dumped her. But of course, that has always been an issue of some contention. Who's right on that? Is that true? Did he really dump her?
Well, Harry is rather like my late father-in-law, who said to my late stepmother-in-law, 2 women have divorced me. I'm not going to allow a third to divorce me unless you pay me £250,000. Because his vanity couldn't stand 3 women divorcing him. Harry couldn't stand the fact that he was going to have to admit that Cressida Bonus was already in the process of, shall we say, nicely dismantling the relationship. Now, I mean, that's how nice girls function. I used to function like that. I used to try to give my boyfriend at the time, when I decided it wasn't going to be worth, my effort further, and nothing was going to come of it, and I didn't love him enough, or blah, 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 that I'd try to let him down gently. And I mean, sometimes you thought you'd succeeded and discovered later on that you hadn't, because they'd seen right through you. Well, Harry, realizing he was going to be pushed, he jumped. So, and then was churlish enough to publish it in a book. But let's remember, Harry was churlish enough to say that he had been de-virginized, and he was a svelte stallion, by a much older woman who's younger than his present wife. So
Exactly.
it's a faith-saving exercise. But my understanding is that he realized that it wasn't going to go the way he wanted it, and so before he got chopped, he did the chopping. And then, as I say, was completely ungentlemanly enough to put this in a book. But it doesn't matter, because she's back. She was back with her old boyfriend, and very happy, and so it's fine. It's fine. And I mean, she doesn't care. I don't think anybody cares. And so.
Then the love of his life, Lady C, the one who really did get away, and I remember chronicling this for a long time during their off-on period, was Chelsea Davy. And I mean, many people, even today, Lady C, believe that that was the hammer blow for Harry. That's when Harry really started to change, when Chelsea just decided, I don't want to do this. What's your understanding about how that impacted him psychologically?
Though Meghan seemed glamorous, exotic, and successful, he didn't see her as a mid-tier TV actress. He saw her as a star. And because he didn't understand the entertainment industry, he bought into the idea that she was bigger than she actually was. At the same time, Meghan looked at Harry and saw not just a prince, but a man who could elevate her status and give her the global platform she wanted.
I don't think it had any of the profound impacts that some people would like to attribute. I think the guy was a jerk. I could actually use a word that begins with A and ends in hole. He behaved because that's how he behaved. And finally, she'd had enough, and she just dropped the axe. And did it stop him from behaving like something that begins with an A and ends in a hole? No, it didn't. And let's remember, Meghan indicated that, and Harry admitted it, that when he tried to pull the stunts with her that he had pulled with other girls, she said to him, "No, I'm not putting up with any of this." So good for her for having done it. But no, I don't think he learned a thing, quite frankly. I don't think Harry has still learned a thing. The lessons Harry is learning at the moment are not profound life lessons. They are pragmatic lessons due to the fact that he and Meghan are in big financial and commercial and professional trouble. And he understands that he needs to retrieve situations so that he can continue to exploit, because this is what it's all about. It's exploitation. And Meghan has taught him well in that regard. I don't think Harry was exploitative before. I think he was careless, and I think he was extremely dependent. And he certainly was paranoid and, a drama queen. And really a pill to have around, and the constant self-important delusionalism that went along with having a relationship with Harry was just taxing and tiresome, and ultimately no sensible girl wanted it. So he got a girl who wanted what he had to offer.
And I mean, it's such a shame in some ways for Chelsea Davy, although I look at her now and she's a mom and she seems to be very happy in her personal life.
She's happy. And she would have made a very good Duchess of Sussex. Cressida Bonus would have made a very good Duchess of Sussex as well. Both of them would have made good Duchesses of Sussex. But each of them is happy in her own private life. And Dan, I have friends, some of whom you've met, who could have married into the royal family and didn't want to, because it's at such a price. Usually girls from privileged backgrounds, they might think, oh, well, it would be nice and fun. And then they realize it's going to be at such a price that and they're not prepared to pay it. And I think we need to bear that in mind as well, that a lot of these girls didn't want it as well because of all the constraints that go along with it. I mean, being royal is really very dull and boring for maybe 90% of the time. You have high points, but the rest of the time it's dull and boring. And most of the work is unsung, and they get a lot of criticism at times that is unfair, and every now and then they get criticism that is fair.
Isn't the problem, though, Lady C, that because he had been so sheltered, that meant that when Meghan came into his life, even though he had all of these people who did really care about him, from Prince William on down, saying, look, just be careful. She doesn't know everything. She doesn't know, she's not quite as she seems. He decided to buy the dream. And I think a lot of that came down to his stupidity too, because he actually didn't understand that Meghan was a bit part actress in a basic cable show, making decent money, but coming to the end of that ride and certainly not a star.
Dan, she was on a maximum of 50,000 per episode.
Maximum.
That's not great money. Sorry.
No, and the residuals were not massive. I mean, no. And remembering she was doing these very sort of B-grade movies in her hiatus on Suits.
Dan, didn't your school teacher when you were a child teach you the alphabet? D or F? Definitely not D. Come on.
Z. But he just totally bought into it, didn't he? He just swallowed her lines, hook, line, and sinker.
Yeah, but Meghan is very dominating and can be very seductive. And she is very, since this is YouTube, I'm going to choose my words carefully. she is very romantic in a horizontal way, and she was able to get him what President Trump called whipped. She managed to use the implement that got him whipped, and so he was enchanted, and but she has a very dynamic personality if you buy into it. And she's certainly got a very strong personality. And Meghan has energy. Meghan has far more energy and is far more brutal than Harry. And it really became a contest as to who was going to dominate whom. And it became apparent to Harry, if you read what he said, by the end of the second date.
Each misrepresented themselves a bit, but it didn't matter. They were both dazzled enough to buy into the dream. At the end of the day, Lady Colin Campbell paints a picture of Harry and Meghan as two people who weren't really victims of circumstance, but architects of their own drama. Harry was desperate, insecure, and looking for someone to rescue him from loneliness and irrelevance. Meghan was ambitious, dominant, and looking for a stage bigger than Hollywood could give her. When they met, it was like two sharks circling, both powerful in their own way, both hungry for something more. They fed each other's illusions, locked into each other's intensity, and built a partnership based not on the quiet, steady love William and Kate found, but on energy, ambition, and exploitation. And that, Lady C suggests, is why their story has turned out the way it has. Not as a fairy tale, but as a cautionary tale of what happens when desperation meets opportunism.